Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Center for Spiritual Living Victoria Online. If you're joining us for the first time today, my name is Carrie Hunter, and I'm the Senior Minister at the Center here in Victoria. And I'm really delighted that we are now back in our physical space, our new physical space, which is in the Cook Street Village, Cook Street Activity Center on Sunday mornings. But some of our people are still under quarantine by choice. And so I am still recording some semblance of the talk that I give. I never seem to give the same one twice, but I'm continuing on with the topic that I began last week, which is based on one of Deepak Chopra's books. And this week's talk is called Beyond the Zero Point. And this is not to be confused with the book that was written about Ho'oponopono that was called Zero Point. This has to do with something completely different. Deepak Chopra wrote this book about God and its future. I think it was about 4 years ago that it came out. And he felt compelled to write it because he was so opposed to what Richard Dawkins had been teaching, that there was nothing to believe in, that there was no God, that there was no point in having faith in anything at all. And so there was this atheism that began to really spring up around those thoughts. To Dawkins, everything was about science and about the human brain, and he couldn't go beyond that. And Deepak Chopra just really felt a need to discuss this and to oppose what Dawkins had been saying. And so his book was born as a result of this. And so my talk today is really about the 0 point. And Deepak Chopra said that faith is absolutely necessary. And Dawkins said that it was not. He said, from faith springs passion, and from passion springs love, and from love, everything is possible. And so it's something that we have to really consider these days. And the thing that I talked about last week that Chopra had said is that, we have different levels of faith, different levels of belief, and that it is time for us to create a God, a contemporary God, a God that we can understand. And, as many faiths as there are, as much that has been written, as many churches, that exist, as many traditions around the world, there are so many things about them that today, in this age, where, we spend so much time learning about science, we spend so much time questioning things, that we really need to question our belief systems, but we also need to come to a new understanding about God. And one of the things that I liked that he said is that, Scripture says that we were created in the image of God, but he said what's really happened is we have created God in our image. We created a God that looks like some old man up in the sky, who's judging us and who has a form that looks human, rather than the other way around. When we are created in the image of God, God the invisible, that invisible power that is within each one of us, it's a whole other way of looking at things. And so, as we question our belief in God, our faith, what is it that we believe in? Do we believe in some tired old religion, or are we searching for something new? Do we believe in something else, or maybe we're just picking at little bits here and there that we kind of like? We think, well, yeah, I can live with that bit, but I don't know about the rest of it. Kind of reminds me of a story that I read that really made me chuckle. There was a man named Bubba, and Bubba was a Baptist, and he lived in a neighborhood that was filled with Catholics. And all of the Catholic neighbors really wanted Bubba to become a Catholic. So finally they persuaded him to go and see their priest. And he attended the church for a few Sundays, and finally he said, okay, no problem, he would become a Catholic. So the priest sprinkled him with holy water, and he said, you were born a Baptist, you were raised a Baptist, but now you're a Catholic. And Bubba said thank you, and the two embraced, and off he went. Now, what the neighbors were really concerned about wasn't so much that Bubba was Catholic. What they were concerned about was that every Friday night he lit the barbecue and cooked a steak. And of course, being Catholic, being good Catholics, they were not allowed to eat meat on Fridays. They had to eat fish. So Bubba had seen the light. They thought he had become a Catholic, and came Friday night, and out he was at his barbecue. And he put a big steak on the barbecue again. And the priest came by and was stunned to see what he was doing. And he said, Bubba, what are you doing? And Bubba picked up a little bottle of holy water, and he sprinkled holy water on the steak. And he said, once you were beef, you were born beef, you were raised beef, but now you're a catfish. And don't you love that? It's just taking what is convenient. Do we just take what's convenient in our faith? Are we looking for something deeper? Are we looking for something that we're living with, living in all the time? Not just something that happens now and then, not just when we can just take a little piece of something and think that we can convert it into something else because of something that we've heard. This is a time, Deepak Chopra says, this is the time that we really need to create the God that we can understand. Now, that God that we can understand has long ago been created. It was the beginning of all that is. And one of the things that I love about our teaching and about the teachings in New Thought is that we've always understood that. New Thought has always understood that, has always understood that there is something in the invisible that is inside each of us, equal amounts in every one of us. And it is that creative power, that creative force, that intelligence that is in everyone and everything. It is impersonal. As we think, we create. And that's a tough one for us to perhaps wrap our minds around a lot of the time. But basically, our thoughts do create form, which has now been proven by science. And we're still in the early stages of that. But it's an exciting time. And it's an exciting thing to think that this power is in everyone and everything and created everything out of these little particles, these little waves. And so it's a time for questioning. We who've been in this teaching for a long time have a deeper understanding of it, and hopefully our faith is strong. And Deepak Chopra talks about the importance of that. And last week, I talked about him saying that, there are different stages that we may be in disbelief, and from disbelief, we move into a place of hope. I hope there's a God. Really hope so, because I'm in deep trouble this time, and I just really hope that there's something there or someone there that's going to listen to me. And then as we practice our faith, as we deepen it, and that takes practice. It's like going to the gym. You don't develop that muscle overnight. We don't develop our spiritual muscle overnight. It's like going to the gym and building upon it. We pray, we meditate, we read, we have discussion about these things. And we find that our faith begins to deepen. And then it turns into knowledge. It turns into the place where I can say, I know that I know that I know. I know that God exists in me, as me, expressing through me, just as it expresses in you, as you, expressing through you. We just need to stay awake. We need to stay awake to that fact and hold that vision for ourselves and know that we can use it, the power for good in the universe that is there for us to use, as Ernest Holmes always said. And so as we examine this, I was thinking, Deepak Chopra talked about the day that he thought that 0 point really began, when faith just dissolved on this planet. And that was July 16th, 1946, when an atomic bomb exploded in the desert in New Mexico. Now, it was the first explosion of the atomic bomb. And he said at that point, humanity felt doomed. Humanity began to believe that all of the earth was going to be annihilated, all of the people on the earth were going to be annihilated. And he called that 0 point, that point where people really stopped believing. I might argue that because during the worst of times, I think sometimes our faith becomes the strongest. That's when we really turn to God. That's when we really start exploring our values and exploring what the truth is for us. But Deepak Chopra's written 87 books and I haven't. So let's continue with it with his thinking about 0 point happening then. And perhaps it was a time when people began to question more. I have no idea. But he felt that that really was the beginning of it. And terrible things happened after that with the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which brought an end to the Second World War. But there have always been times where people believed it, where people didn't. And there have been times where there are people who might be called immature believers, in the sense that they would believe anything that anyone told them, rather than questioning. And questioning is good. It's something that we do have to do. We have different levels of connection with the divine. You know, that Deepak says that the first level of connection is about understanding that there is something beyond ourselves. You know, probably most of us as little children had thoughts like that, maybe didn't know what to call that or to call it, but something bigger than ourselves. You know, remember lying on the grass as a little kid and looking at the stars in the sky and understanding that somebody told you that we were lying on the face of the earth, on the surface of the earth, and held down by gravity, an invisible force holding us to the surface of the earth. And out there was this fabulous, beautiful cosmos. And I remember as a child thinking, what's beyond it all? You know, what is beyond the universe? Is there something beyond that? Where does it begin? Where does it end? When we start understanding that there is something bigger, something that we can't describe, something that is possibly invisible, then we're starting to really get a handle on God and just exactly what God might be. And so we're asked to believe in the invisible. And, you know, that's an important thing to consider. We believe in gravity, we can't see it. We believe in electricity and we can't see it. We flip on the switch and it works. There are many things that we believe in that we take for granted. But for some reason, it's sometimes more difficult to believe in God, in an invisible power, an invisible force that just might inhabit our bodies, that we might be expressions of the divine. And so that's something that's important for us to contemplate. You know, we find good sometimes in the darkest places. And I think that that's also a place where we can look at us believing in something better. You know, the darkest places sometimes turn us toward the dawn, looking for the light, looking toward the light, looking to understand things, looking for hope, looking for something beyond hope, looking to create something better. And I've been talking a lot about George Floyd the past few weeks and about the racism that we encounter in our lives and about some of the horrific things that have been happening. They've not just been happening in the last few weeks, they've been happening for hundreds of years, for thousands of years. But we're becoming so much more aware of them now. And I have so much hope when I see someone like George Floyd, who has been murdered in front of our eyes on television, and seeing that he is greater in death than he might ever have been in life. The same way that Martin Luther King was, the same way that, you know, JFK was, that Robert Kennedy was. You know, they became immortalized because of their death. The thing is that what's happened with George Floyd, of course, is that people are marching in the streets demanding justice, and they're people of every race. And so in a time of ultimate darkness, when George Floyd was killed, and in recent weeks, others after him. People of all races, of all cultures, of all religions are walking together saying that this must end. This kind of racism must end, and it must end now. Out of the darkness, a light is emerging. Out of the darkness, something good is coming of this man's death. And so when we look at these things, these are also ways that we can start to understand a higher power at work, a higher purpose in our lives. It's so important. You know, remember the March on Washington, after the inauguration of the President of the United States, the current one, and the women who marched around the world. And there were men in those marches too, but predominantly women. And they marched, and it was a glorious day, and they were celebrating. They were celebrating themselves. They were celebrating the divine feminine. They were celebrating hope. And they said they were not going to allow this kind of thing to happen again, that someone like this would be elected again. And they organized, and many of them ran for office, and many women were elected in 2018. It shows the power when we are determined to see change, when we're just determined to see something happen. And that power is not just something random. That something is indwelling in us. You know, and so I ask, what is your God experience? What has happened in your own life where you can say, oh, okay, I get it. I can see that there was an invisible power at work in my life. I can see that there was an intelligence there, that there is an intelligence there. Maybe you've witnessed a miracle in your own life. And if you haven't, you've probably witnessed them in movies, on television, when the most extraordinary things suddenly happen, things that transform us. And I remember last week I was talking about Elizabeth Gilbert and the section in Eat, Pray, Love, where she was sitting on the bathroom floor and crying, weeping, just in terrible, terrible depression, and just shouting at God, I don't believe in you anymore. I just don't believe in you. And I'm sorry, but my cell phone is ringing, and I just have to hang it up. My apologies for that. So Elizabeth Gilbert was sitting on the floor weeping and shouting, I don't believe in you anymore. And after a while, as she continued to cry, a voice inside her said, who are you talking to then? You know, don't we do these things? Don't we sometimes rant and rage, thinking that we don't believe, and yet, who are we talking to? Who are we praying to when we are desperate, when we are on our knees praying? You know, when we come to realize the truth of who we are, when we really come to understand that we are each an expression of God, an individualized expression of God, then that is the time that we are in total connection. And what a wonderful place to be. I remember Deborah Johnson writing a book years ago. It was called The Sacred Yes, where she says, run toward God as if you were running toward your lover. Take God as a lover. You know what it's like when you are falling in love, or when you're first in love, and you can't wait to talk to that person. You can't wait to tell that person about your day. You can't wait to tell them about what's happened, or if it's not been so good, you can't wait to just feel their arms around you and to feel their love and compassion for what's been going on. And when you finish work at the end of the day, you just want to run to them. You want to be with them. What if we ran to God that way? What if we ran to God every moment that we had something to celebrate? And ran to God when we need that love and compassion, knowing that it is always there, and that we don't have to go anywhere to look for it. It is right there within us. What an amazing, amazing place that would be. So, I think of Ernest Holmes talking about life eternal. I mean, that part of us, that spirit within us that goes on forever. And when asked if he believed in life after death, and he said, no, I don't. People looking at him strangely, and he said, I don't believe in death. You see, he understood and he taught about the eternality of the soul, that part of us, that spark of us that goes on forever. And that is the part of God that we are, the expression that we are. And it's so important for us to remember that and to be open to possibilities. You know, how often do we just perhaps close our minds? But, you know, we need to be open to the possibility that thoughts create form, because it's been proven now that they do. We may not like that very much because we might not like our circumstances, but the fact is that when we're having thoughts, not just a simple fleeting thought, I'm talking about things that we focus upon. You know, what we focus upon expands. So our thoughts that we're consistently focused upon start expanding. All the more reason to have good thoughts and positive thoughts about everything. And so it's important for us to remember this and to be consciously thinking, consciously using our thoughts. And let's be open to knowing that prayer works. You know, we have something called spiritual mind treatment, and by gosh, it works. And it does sometimes works overnight, sometimes works in a New York minute, as the expression goes. Sometimes it takes a bit longer, and we're learning all along the way. But it works. As a friend of mine said to me the other day, you know, we may not get what we want, but we get what we need. We get what we need at the time, which helps us with our growth. And that's why we also have to be open to the idea that there are no accidents. That when we're going through times of challenge or struggle, that we need to accept that we can move beyond them. We can move way beyond them. And then we need to figure out how we're going to do that. And that means being positive. That means lighting the path along the way, finding the way to do that kind of thing. It's the same thing with suffering, that, you know, we can find our way out. We need to know that. We weren't meant to suffer. Life was not meant to be a struggle. But some of us make it a struggle. And so the way out of that is to renew our faith. And if we've never had it, to start working on it and to start growing it and start hoping until we get to the place of knowing. And also know that if we're feeling lonely, especially during these times when people have been quarantined and we've had to experience social isolation, we are never really alone. There is this power that is always with us. And if we but pray and meditate, if we talk to God, if we listen, then we're going to get messages along the way, that divine guidance telling us always what to do. It is so important for us to remember this. You know, there's an expression I love, and that's that faith is a candle in the window waiting for God. Faith is a candle in the window waiting for God. And I guess I would say also, faith is a candle in the window, and that it is there for us to see the light, to awaken the God within us. When we start to do this, when we start to build our faith, when we get to that place of knowing, when that candle reflects in our hearts who we really are, that we are God having a human experience, Spirit having a human experience, each and every one of us, no matter who we are, no matter what our lives look like, no matter what we do or how we express, we are each expressions of the divine. And if we use that power within us for good, then goodness comes from it. And as Dr. Holmes said, evil is the misuse of that power. So let's get going on the good, with good thoughts, with great ideas, with positive thinking, with hope, with faith, knowing that Our God is an awesome God. It's not that ancient God that we perhaps grew up with. It is this expression of the divine everywhere in everything. And it is good. It is wonderful. It is magnificent. And as we accept this together, we are awakening ourselves and humanity to spiritual magnificence. And so it is. Thank you for being with me today. Thank you for your donations. We really appreciate it. You can go to the top of our webpage and donate there, or send an e-transfer to welcome@cslvictoria.org, or an e-transfer to welcome@csl.org. We really appreciate everything that you do. It has helped us keep going during the pandemic, and it has certainly helped us to open up our new facility, and we're delighted with that. Hope to see you there someday. And if you need spiritual counseling, or if you'd like to discuss this further, just look on our website and you'll find the name of one of our ministers or practitioner who would be happy to talk to you and to tell you more about this. Have a wonderful week, and let's just look for all of the good around us. And so it is.